Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's show, we recap Giannis in another impressive outing for Greece, as they are now one win away from qualifying for the Olympics. We'll share our thoughts on how he looked out there, some subtle changes that we've seen from the Giannis of years past, and some news to catch you up on over the course of the past few days as it pertains to former members of the Bucks, new additions by the Bucks, and moves continuing to be made by the Philadelphia 76ers. It all comes up after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined by Camille Davis, as we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube, as well as some of you have joined us for the live stream of today's show. All of that is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Camille, we took a couple of days off, as we noted, for the 4th of July holiday. So hope everybody was able to do the same and enjoy a couple of days of rest and relaxation and enjoy the 4th of July. But part of it was strategic as well, knowing there was a couple of Greece games that were around there. And one of them we thought was a very big game with Giannis versus Luka Doncic earlier this morning. The winner would advance to, got to get the verbiage right here, the finals, essentially, of their region to qualify for the Olympics. You and I were talking during the game of, you weren't really sure what to expect. I didn't expect Greece to win this game. And I mean, from the start, it was a beatdown by Greece on Slovenia. And you could see some of the frustration growing from Luka Doncic throughout the course of the game. So Giannis is now one win away. Giannis and Greece, I should say, now one win away from qualifying for the Olympics. We will get to Giannis's overall play, as I think a few of us pointed out, the stat line from the first game he had played in this tournament, but a couple of subtle changes that we saw in his overall game as well. But before we do get to that, your impressions as somebody that wasn't sure what to expect, what were your takeaways from this?
My first takeaway was just, man, I really missed watching Giannis play basketball. Like, of course, we're used to him in the Bucks jersey, but understanding what playing for Greece means for him, and also seeing that Giannis has never played in the Olympics for the Greece team yet. When I saw, I was like, really? Like, never? So I know how much this means to him. So, like, my first reaction was just, I am so happy to be watching him playing basketball again, because it's been a while. April 9th, when he went down with that injury against the Celtics with the calf that kept him out throughout the playoffs, and then throughout the rest of the Bucks season effectively. So really nice to see him playing again. The first game looked a little bit rusty at times, but he was perfect from the field in the very first game. He's catching lobs, getting rebounds, looking like what we expect to see from Giannis. And then today against Slovenia, one of the good things about Greece coming out early with the big lead and continuing to build upon that was that Giannis did not have to play many minutes. I've been hearing through the broadcast that he's been on a minutes restriction as well throughout these qualifying games. So understanding that, but seeing he only had to play like 20, 21 minutes today in that game against Luka and Slovenia was like, that's a nice little bonus right there. Just keeping the minutes low while he's easing back into playing shape. So happy to see him. Cool to see that Greece is here at this point. Happy to see that his minutes were low and that there is a plan because he is coming back from an injury. I'm just feeling good about it right now.
Yeah. And, we mentioned, so now Greece advances, a chance for Giannis to play for Greece in the Olympics for the first time. I believe that game is tomorrow.
Yeah. It's a quick turnaround.
Quick turnaround in the final there. So, Bucks fans also wondering, how do we watch this? You can subscribe to the Zone or the Courtside 1890 app to watch it, is how both of us took it in. I'm sure there's some other ways to do it via streaming as well, but that's how you can see this, and that's how you can see Giannis tomorrow, seeing if he can take Greece into the Olympics. But I don't want to take too much away from it. I agree with you when you watched, especially the first basket that he scored, where he had that spin move and flipped it off the glass, short-handed with his right hand off the glass at an awkward angle for the and one. I don't want to take too much from it, partially because of the competition, and it's just a different game in international play. But I had the same thoughts of, man, I really missed seeing that for the past few months. It is always kind of striking, though, when you watch Giannis play for Greece in these international tournaments and games. And how I mentioned the game is different than the NBA game, but you see Giannis's usage different, where he is very much a traditional big man in international play. He's not bringing the ball up. Nick Theis is the point guard essentially for Greece, and he's the guy that's handling those responsibilities. But it's just fascinating to see some of those usages, and I'm sure it's what Bucks fans through the years have pointed to say, like, especially with Dame, can you do this? Because I see it work at this level. Can we figure out how to harness that?
I think it's just about who you have around him and what the plan is overall, because one thing that does make Giannis special is his ability to bring it up, so on and so forth. So it's like you got to find that happy medium when it comes to the usage and how he's used, thinking of him in the Bucks jersey primarily here because of what his special talents are. And I think that with the Bucks, and we've talked about just the lineup, the roster construction and who's playing what. And we saw this past year when Giannis was down without Chris, when Dame was having various injuries, just like, man, you really wish they had another ball handler here. But seeing him with Greece where he's not playing that ball handler role, like you mentioned, he really was playing a traditional big. I saw that Costas had got injured in the last game against Egypt, so they were another big short. So they really were playing through him as a big man. But I get it for the context, but like I said, there are some special things in this game when he is able to bring the ball up, especially after a rebound, where he can initiate that transition. Like, you want to see him with the ball in his hands in that situation. And I mean, even looking at the Bucks roster construction, we've been talking about, should they get a backup point guard at some point? Because right now, I mean, it's not official, but DeLon Wright is on his way to the Bucks, and he, can play backup point guard. He's a combo guard. He's not seen as somebody who really like sets up the table for his teammates there. So I think about Giannis, and again, that's where the role comes in. So in a Bucks uniform, it may not be as much ball in Giannis's hands as we've seen in years past before Dame. But I think that there are some ways to be able to use that effectively around Dame and having him be more of that secondary ball handler role.
We should point out, too, Greece now waits to see who wins between Croatia and the Dominican Republic. That's who they will play on Sunday, with the winner qualifying for the Olympics. I see some comments, and this was kind of kicked around among Bucks fans, especially after that first game of Giannis's, he's got a new free throw routine. And I think there are some multiple components to it. As Sam notes, there is a time limit in international play, but the one dribble about 4 to 5 seconds and then goes up with it looks much more efficient at the free throw line, and efficiency overall in that first box score where he missed no shots. His first miss came in the second quarter of Saturday's game when he missed at the rim, of all places.
Yeah, is that the one when he is the lob that he kind of missed?
Caught it himself and then rebounded.
And puts it right back up again. It feels like every year, if not every year, it's like every other year, there is a conversation around Giannis's free throws. There's some video that gets leaked. We're looking at his form and like, this has been changed and this should be better this year. But it's, once we get to the season, I have felt like the part of the reason that Giannis takes so long with his free throw routine now in the NBA is because he's trying to catch his breath. Like it seems to me just like I'm going to use all 10, maybe 11, 12, 13 seconds sometimes to try and catch my breath because of how quickly he likes to play the game, how much he's always putting out effort wise when he's playing the game. And he just needs that moment to like, let me catch my breath and continue on. So that's part of why I felt like that routine has gotten very, very long. And I'm one of the first to admit it's a very long free throw game in and game out. But seeing him have to speed it up for the FIBA game, it's one of those things where you're like, it does look really good. But we've been here before having a conversation about the free throw looking good or looking different. So when it comes to the free throw and even the 3-point shooting with Giannis, just show me the regular, like, let me just see it, how it actually plays out in game.
Overall, no complaints on what we saw from Giannis. And now I think we're all very eager to see, can he lead Greece to the Olympics? It's going to be a tall order, especially if it's Croatia that they have in tomorrow's matchup. But it would be the first time we got to see Giannis representing Greece at that level. There is quite a bit of news in terms of personnel moves to catch you up on. So we will get into that, all the comings and goings. One more addition for the Bucks, one more addition for the 76ers, and a former Buck moves on. Camille and I will get into that conversation next on Locked On Bucks. Passion, drive, and patience. That is the formula for winning championships and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Camille, a lot of free agency news to catch people up on. Let's start with what came in one of the days that we took off. Taurean Prince. One of the names, I don't think any of us really had him on our list of potential targets. But Taurean Prince agrees to join the Bucks on a one-year vet minimum. This would be the third time that he's been on a team where Darvin Ham is involved. And I think Bucks fans may not know much about him. If you don't, I think the two things you probably heard the most. Number one, his moment of infamy. He was the guy at the NCAA tournament who talked through rebounding to that reporter that asked the question and how they were out rebounded by their opponent. And then also, if you followed the Lakers last year, I think one of the common gripes among Laker fans were that Darvin Ham played Taurean Prince too much. In that one season that he spent in Los Angeles, started 49 games out of the 78 that he played in. He's reunited with Darvin Ham, played for him with the Lakers last year, played for Mike Budenholzer and assistant coach Darvin Ham his first 2 years in the league with the Atlanta Hawks. This is an interesting signing because I don't anticipate Taurean Prince to start for this team, but he's a capable defender, and he's shown the ability to knock down shots throughout his career. 39% three-point shooter last year. He's about 38% for his career. Played 27 minutes a game last year. I think the number you'd be looking for probably in the low 20s, but when we talk through those playoff rotations and where the Bucks got to a season ago of trying to find guys you could throw out there that could hold up defensively, that's not going to be a question with Taurean Prince, and especially in a spot where it seems like the Bucks need that help the most, and that being a larger wing.
Yeah, we've talked about it. Like, okay, backup guard, a wing defender, and a versatile big are like three of the prototype players that we've talked about the Bucks possibly adding this offseason that would be good pickups for him. And I think part of why, for myself, I didn't talk too much about Taurean Prince is I thought he'd go for a little bit more than the vet men. So I just was like, I'm not going to even really think about the prospects of him signing with the Bucks, but it worked out. I think it's a really good signing. And again, we mentioned this before, but like when you think about why the Bucks went out and got Jay Crowder, a lot of it was to be this bigger guard, this bigger wing guy who might be a small ball forward at times. He can stretch the floor. He can play really good defense. He's going to give you great rotational minutes. The Jay experiment didn't go as planned in Milwaukee for the whole course of his time here. But again, a lot of those traits that you were looking at for a Jay Crowder, you would be able to get with a Taurean Prince, that wing defender with some experience behind him. He can knock down the three. He can be a small ball four. It's a really good pickup. And again, it's all about how he's utilized as well. I mean, I know we're going to mention Malik Beasley, but we've talked about how important role is to really maximize what a player does well and also try to minimize what those weaknesses might be as well. So with Prince, like you mentioned, I don't think playing him 27 minutes a night is in the cards or the most beneficial way to use a player like him. But like the low 20s and spot, like he can be a really good rotational piece. And we've talked a lot about this Bucks team and the makeup and last season what they were lacking. And they've ramped up that defense. Like both of the free agent signings that we've heard so far with Wright and now Prince are two guys who project to be pretty good defenders. So that's what you want to see with this team adding, especially if they can continue to space the floor, which Prince can do. So that's a wing signing that I was like, yeah, that's a really good pickup for the Bucks.
Yeah, and as you know, we look over the Bucks roster as it stands now, I feel like at this point you have probably 9 rotational guys that you would say this guy is definitely can be a part of an NBA rotation, regardless of how you feel about Pat Connaughton. He's a rotational piece, right? You have developmental guys, and we talked about it on the show earlier in the week when we heard from John Horst and Doc Rivers about their plan and the intent behind trying to blend vets with youth. But I think you look at AJ Johnson and Tyler Smith as guys that are on the roster, but probably going to be in Oshkosh quite a bit. And those are developmental roles. Chris Livingston's a guy that we heard, hey, we expect him to contribute and compete for minutes this upcoming season. It's about the same size as Taurean Prince. So that's where it starts to get interesting, that you have Chris Livingston, Taurean Prince, and Marjan all at that position. Obviously, Andre Jackson Jr. is another one that you throw out there as well, who's same size. Is he more of a point guard? Do we see, Ajax essentially take that role? To me, there's the questions that stand now for this team are the final spots. I would assume it's a big that they use it on. So we'll see where that stands. I know people have kind of kicked around. I know he's injured, but are they going to bring back Theis? So I suppose that's one of the questions as well. The other big ones for me are, you mentioned DeLon Wright. Is he a backup point guard? He has been a combo guard throughout his career. Do you start him at the 2 guard, or what's the plan there? And if you do, does that mean Andre Jackson Jr. is the backup point guard? Is it Marjan? Is it somebody else that has the chance to compete for that spot in training camp? I know people have kicked around AJ Green as well. I still don't necessarily see AJ Green replacing Malik Beasley and coming into the season as the starting 2 guard. But again, you at least know he is a rotational piece. So those to me are really the biggest questions that are left now in this offseason. If we are to assume, after listening to John Horst and Doc Rivers just the other day, that look, we have this group of vets that have been with this team outside of Damian Lillard for the last few years now and have that chemistry. We've got these young guys that we started to develop the last 2 years. We added 2 more to the mix. Obviously, the additions that they made in DeLon Wright and Taurean Prince as well. So here's our blend of youth with experience. To me, now the big question is, okay, what do you do at 2 guard? Because we know it will not be Malik Beasley. And you and I kind of kicked around too. Boy, would you entertain if you could get Beasley back for the vet minimum again, and you could give him 120%, pay him 120% of what he made last year? Would you do that? I know there's some limitations there on the defensive end, but just to have another guy that can shoot and score for you, that's off the table now. As we saw Malik Beasley this morning agree to, I think it was a 1-year deal with the Detroit Pistons for $6 million. So a couple of thoughts that we have on that. Number one, I was very curious to see who the suitors were going to be for Bees, because we had started to hear as the offseason advanced of it's done. And even I think the report out there that Malik Beasley believed he had played his last game in a Bucks uniform. So you're looking around thinking, okay, who's going to sign him? Is it going to be another veterans minimum? Is he going to get more than that? And to see him go to the Pistons for essentially slightly more than the vet minimum, I don't mean this as a knock on Bees, but I think it kind of tells you, depending on how you viewed him last year, if you were right and how the rest of the league kind of viewed Malik Beasley after especially the last 2 trips to the playoffs where he was not played or unplayable.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I think another part of it is just landing locations, right? There are a couple of teams going into free agency where I was like, Malik Beasley would be a really good fit on these particular teams. Like Orlando was a team where I was like, they need the shooting. Like that's a fit that works. And Orlando has a lot of size behind them as well. Plus you got Jalen Suggs in the front court or back court with them. So like to get defensive guard next to him, you have a lot of length behind them. Like that could be a situation that works. They cashed out KCP, and I can't blame them for making that choice when you get a guy who's a 3 and D. So like that makes sense. You look at a team like the Mavericks, where it was like they also were looking for some shooting. They went and got Klay Thompson, who has some more experience behind him. We all know Klay is not the same Klay that he was pre-injury, so on and so forth, but he instantly became the best shooter on that Mavericks team, even with all of the time behind him, experience on his legs, him not being the same defender. And they might have some questions defensively, how they're going to operate with him, Luka, and Kyrie. But Dallas was another spot where I thought Malik Beasley made sense. But once Klay went there, didn't make as much sense. And now you're seeing the market play out. You're seeing guys landing places. So I started getting curious too. Like, what does this mean for Bees? Like, where is he going to go? Which is why when me and you discussed, maybe they do roll the dice and just say, let's go another year. Like, let's run it back another year. Maybe the role's a bit different, but let's go again. Instead, he goes and he chases a little bit of bag. I mean, that was part of why he signed with Milwaukee in the first place, taking a year to bet on himself to try to make more money the following year, or at least like in a contract with some more years and more guaranteed stability there. And the market just didn't seem to shake out that way. Another 1-year deal where he can go back out next year and see if he can get a long-term contract, find him a long-term landing spot. But we knew Detroit was one of those teams that had a lot of cap space. So they were going to be able to spend some money on some guys. So seeing him take the check to go to Detroit, like you said, it just kind of shows where the market was, as well as some of the best fits I thought for Bees really just dried up with other options being taken ahead of him.
Yeah, and I saw the report too. Man, Detroit it's part of their rebuild that they're trying to bring in some more scoring. They added Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and Malik Beasley. I'm not sure that's what I would be putting on the banners outside the arena.
I mean, they do need it. They do need the shooting.
They do need the shooting. But yeah, good luck with that to the Pistons. Best of luck to Malik Beasley as well, who moves on. And there's a couple more moves that were made as well, or one other big move that also came Saturday and could have an impact on the Bucks. So we do want to take a look at that, as the Philadelphia 76ers are not done yet. They keep making moves. We'll discuss their latest coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. If you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day and constantly have to turn down the volume due to all the shouting, it means it's time to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, and it streams 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Camille, I mentioned there was one other move that was made, and that was by the Philadelphia 76ers, who are not done yet. They've added Caleb Martin on a very team-friendly deal as well. 4 years, $32 million. I think the reporting from Woj is that he's going to start at the 4 for the Sixers. So you're looking at a starting lineup with Joel Embiid, Caleb Martin, Paul Pierce, Tyrese Maxey, and then continuing to round things out. On paper, it's a whole lot of talent. I think the one thing that Bucks fans would caution 76ers fans is, man, you got 2 holdovers from last year, and that's it. And this was a Bucks group that had a lot of holdovers, but adding Damian Lillard and a few other pieces, it took time to get that up to speed. So there's going to be a world of expectations on the 76ers this year, and I think we're all very curious to see how that goes.
Got to see how they continue to build out the roster, but getting Caleb Martin is a great pickup for them for sure. I mean, like you mentioned, just how the lineup is coming together with Embiid, with Martin, with George, with Maxey. The core is really good. We know they got Drummond coming off the bench as a backup center. They got Eric Gordon, who they signed to a vet man as well. So the team is starting to fill out pretty well. The Sixers are doing what they hope to do. Like, that was a risk for Philly this year. Just saying, we're going to use cap space and we're going to believe that we're going
paid
to
off.
get one of these
Yeah.
big free
I think
agents.
we all
Like,
kind of criticize it. You and I were even having conversations of what if they strike out here? Are they a trade partner for one of your guys? And I suppose the joke's on us because everything they envisioned happening, it happened so far.
yeah, and it was close to not happening. Like Draymond Green going on his
Mhm.
podcast and talking about the fact that Warriors, they were talking about they wanted Paul George, but the Clippers didn't want to do that business. So, I mean, in Draymond's world, he's just like, well, y'all stupid. Y'all lost them for nothing. Now you could have got something, but now you got nothing. But Philly got what they wanted. And that was a big free agent to sign to, use that max space on to pair. And honestly, upgrading from a trio of Embiid, Maxey, and Tobias Harris to Maxey, Embiid, and Paul George is an upgrade. Like, I know we have the health questions around it, and that's going to be a big question with Philly, just given the health history of Embiid, Paul George as well. Like, two of your major, cornerstones of your team have had some health issues in the past. But I guess as a Bucks fan, you got to look in the mirror and go, well, the last few years for us health-wise haven't been that great either when we got to the playoffs, with Giannis missing this past playoff series, being injured in the Heat series 2 years ago. We know what's happened with Chris Middleton since the championship. So the top of the East, like, that health is going to be a very, very important piece, not just for Phil. I mean, it's for everybody, but thinking of the core players in it, like, it's going to be a big deal.
It's going to be a big deal, and it's a massive upgrade to go from Tobias Harris to Paul George. I think the one thing, again, continuity is going to be big to see how that plays out. I think the fact that you have Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid with that chemistry is going to be helpful for the 76ers, but save for that, most of the roster is going to be brand new. So that's going to be the interesting thing to monitor. Also, Paul George. I mean, we've already heard the conversations of, well, he's your number 3. Is there a better number 3 in the league? On paper, no. But, like, is Paul George fine with being the number 3 option in Philadelphia? Are we sure it's not going to be Embiid, George, and Maxey? And what does that mean for Tyrese Maxey? So there's just a lot of moving pieces into it. The Caleb Martin piece, he's not a superstar, but as we witnessed in the playoffs, he's a very good player and is very helpful as a two-way star. Some reporting coming out of Miami as well that he turned down a 5-year, $65 million deal with the Heat and ended up taking half as much money over 4 years with the 76ers, which left the Heat perplexed. I know Bobby Marks was talking about this quite a bit as well with this plan that the 76ers have had here through the offseason, which, we've all kind of had critical comments through the years of Daryl Morey, but they had a clear plan. And so far on paper, it's worked. That this is going to be very, very interesting to examine moving forward, in that Tyrese Maxey did not extend last offseason. And that was the big piece in really keeping him at bay. And look, we do want to extend you. You are going to be a big part of this team. But here's our plan. So if you can just hold off 1 year, we'll reward you next offseason, which, can be tenuous and easier said than done for most players. But by not extending him last offseason, they were able to free up all that money to sign Paul George, Andre Drummond, and Caleb Martin with their cap space. They're going to retain Kelly Oubre as well, who we did not mention earlier. They're able to use the room exception for that. They can still keep KJ Martin and sign him and make him a trade piece, since he'd seemingly be lost in the shuffle with this team. So everything is kind of broken their way. That it's going to be interesting to see, can they hit the ground running, and just the overall landscape of the Eastern Conference now. And that, it's been top heavy for years. But if we operate under the assumption, which I think all of us viewing this video and you and I are, that the Bucks, the chemistry is there. Health was a big piece of it last year. All the moving parts were a big piece of it as well. That there's still reasons for optimism and to believe in this group for this upcoming season. If that's the case, the Celtics, the Knicks, who are the 2 seed and added Mikal Bridges, the 76ers and what they've done to revamp their group, the Bucks that we just mentioned, the Cavaliers are saying, hey, we got a new coach, maybe a better coach. We kept Donovan Mitchell as well. We feel like we're in that conversation. Pacers made the Eastern Conference Finals. So all of a sudden now it is a very top-heavy Eastern Conference.
Yeah, we talked about Orlando before about a Beasley spot, but I mean, just given how they're building upon their success last year as well, like I don't see Orlando necessarily in that contender tier, but they're going to be a team that's going to be difficult to beat night in and night out, and they are ready to go again. Interesting combination of size over there in Orlando as well. So the East is going to be one of those conference. I mean, it was turning into that last year where you couldn't necessarily take a night off unless you were playing like Detroit or something like that at
Well,
that point.
as we learned early in the season, not necessarily.
Yeah, those games were still a little close for comfort against Detroit for the Bucks. Right before Adrian Griffin got let go. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So yeah, the Bucks are going to have to hit the ground running themselves. Just thinking about how last year we talked about all the different things that contributed to how the season ended up the way that it did. And we talked about how good it's going to be for this team to have training camp with Doc Rivers, for him to be able to get eyes on guys. We've talked about how Horst and Doc have put this roster together this way on purpose. Like there might be another free agent pickup, but they look to have this type of balance where there's a few more vets than young guys, but it's a really good mix. And they want training camp to be really competitive with these young guys pushing. And it's like, we want the best guys on the court to play. So for the Bucks, part of what they're counting on here is that internal development aspect as well, which from the outside looking in, it's going to be hard for us to really try to put into words of how big that's going to be, or like, how is it going to play out? Because we don't get to see the same access to the team that these guys are seeing. Like Horace coming out and saying like, we think Chris Livingston's going to have a role this year. It's like, oh, like we've talked about it. Like Justin, you have been part of like the Chris Livingston fan club, just, the captain of it at this point. And I don't even think that if you would have been told like, hey, you think he's going to like be in the rotation? Like maybe he has the tools for it, but hearing Horace say like, no, we expect to see him in the rotation at some point, contributing at some point. So it's going to be one of those things where it's hard to quantify what that might look like based on what these young guys do. If they don't take a jump, then the Bucks are going to be in a difficult position. But if they do take a jump, one or two of those guys, it can really change the dynamics for the team.
It can. And one other piece that's kind of tied to that, or two things I suppose we should mention, are Sixers have been very active. They worked out a sign-in trade with Buddy Hield going to the Golden State Warriors in a big payday for Buddy Hield, getting $21 million guaranteed when he was not used by the 76ers down the stretch in the playoffs. So Buddy Hield goes. The Warriors give up the second round pick that they got from the Mavs for Klay Thompson. And I believe the Sixers generate a trade exception with that as well. All these moves, though, when we mentioned, not to get way too into the weeds here, but 76ers using their cap space to make these moves, using the room exception to keep Kelly Oubre. What it does mean is that Paul Reed is going to be waived by the 76ers, who had a partially guaranteed contract. By no means a bruiser or anything. He does possess some skill, and we saw him play quite a bit last year in place of Joel Embiid during those injuries. That's going to be interesting. When we said, Bucks, you would think that last spot is going to go towards a big man. As we look through the sheet that you, me, and Frank have kind of kept tabs on for free agents throughout this offseason, the only big that's out there in terms of free agency is Daniel Theis. You could go the trade route, but again, that makes things much more complicated. So then you have the potential of Paul Reed hitting the free agent market. Now, he can be claimed on waivers, and I've seen people suggest the Pistons might be interested in claiming him once he does hit waivers. They, of course, just lost James Wiseman to the Indiana Pacers. And people saying, well, why would you do that when he's making, I think it's $6 or $7 million, wait for him to clear waivers and then sign him? He probably would. But yeah, if you're the Pistons, is Paul Reed going to sign with you, or is Paul Reed going to sign with a competing team or a contending team that shows interest with him? So that's one interesting name to monitor. I still kind of lean towards, if they do sign a big, to use that final spot on a big man, I think we've all kind of kicked around that name of Daniel Theis. And there was a report early in the week as well that there seemed to be mutual interest there. He's perfectly fine as your fourth big man. If Bobby Portis is backing up Giannis, Daniel Theis is backing up Brook Lopez, you could even use it as a way to give Brook Lopez some additional time off during the season and say, okay, Daniel Theis is going to start this game, and Brook just take the day off, take the next 2 days off, where we'll give you rest 3 out of 5 days or something like that. But starting to get to be pretty slim pickings out there on the big man front.
Yeah, it's really slim pickings, Justin, when you're trying to convince me into Daniel Theis. Like, I'm sitting here
Daniel Theis or Paul Reed.
like this just does. I'm like trying to listen. Like, I guess if he could be the fourth big, it just doesn't move me. Where I'm like, that's one of those signings where it's like, we're just doing something to do something, in my opinion, at that point. Like, yes, it's nice to have the body for sure there, but I don't see him giving you anything a bit different from that big spot based on what we've been hearing coming out this summer of just about like the Bucks want to have at least a big that can be a little bit more versatile defensively, where it's like, I don't see Daniel Theis giving us that aspect of it. But again, if it's just a body, because we're just looking for somebody to use up minutes, then there it is. But that's one of those ones where I'm again like, if the Bucks just want to roll with 14 guys right now and just keep it like that, and then use that last space for having the flexibility, if a trade is made and you send out one, you get 2 back. If someone comes available who you thought was going to sign for more money, but as you've mentioned, looking at the big market, it's not a lot there that gets you really excited about like, that's the pick that I want right now. So for me, it's just kind of letting things go the way they go. Outside of Precious Achiuwa, there's no other big name, not big name in the sense of like superstar, big name in the sense of position that they play, that really interests me too much. And even Precious is only like 6'8", so he's not like a big who is backing up Brook in that way. He's just somebody who can give you some different looks if you want to try playing a little bit smaller. But yeah, that's the story of the free agency market when it comes to the bigs this year, though.
Yeah, and look, you and I have talked about this quite a bit about Brook and what's out there. I still stand by. I don't see the trade out there that makes you better, that involves Brook Lopez. I think the only logical one at this point would be if for some reason the Magic would move Wendell Carter. But even then, you're getting a lesser version of Brook Lopez on both ends of the floor. Younger version, cheaper version, but lesser version there. And as people pointed out too, you go into the season with him. If he walks in the offseason, you're over the cap. So you're losing that roster hold, which is true. But you also have an expiring contract at the trade deadline if things need to go down that route. So I still think there's quite a bit of value in keeping it as is with Brook Lopez. I'm sure other things are being explored. I saw people point out, John Horst said there's going to be no moves made. He did not say that. He said we have an intentional plan to blend youth with veterans. He did not say there's no trades that will be made. I still think it's a long shot at this point, but to clarify, he did not specifically say we are not making any trades. And look, there's always stuff that happens once you get through that first wave of free agency. Malik Beasley signed in late July, I think it was last year. Brook Lopez, when the Bucks initially signed him, that was an August free agency signing. And of course, the Damian Lillard trade in September, very end of September. So things always start to happen later in the offseason once teams see the market settle, see maybe they missed out on what their initial targets were. You always have those second wave of moves. So I don't think it's safe to say no moves made and the Bucks are done.
Yeah, it's a lot of time to go. I mean, we've talked about just the fact that the Bucks have until the start of the next league year to get under that second apron and what that means for roster moves in itself. If people are really concerned about cap and cap only, which, there might be a few cap sickos out there who are really into that, but the Bucks have time to get under that. There is a benefit as well of just not making a move for a move's sake. We've talked about that a lot as well. And I agree with you that I haven't seen a move that makes the Bucks better. With trading Brook Lopez, it makes you different, can make it cheaper, the team cheaper. It can, make you a little bit younger possibly, but I'm not sure about better. So if there's nothing that is standing out right now, then there is no harm in keeping him on the roster. You have until the trade deadline. If something does come up at that time, you don't know how the rest of the league will shake out, how injuries might impact what teams are looking for. So I don't think that it's a crime against humanity if the Bucks end up rolling into the regular season without having made any trades of those core 6 guys that Horst named before. And really, it's just the 3, Brook, Bobby, and Pat, where those are the names that we've heard the most, where even if we don't make a trade heading into training camp. That does not mean that they will finish the 2024-25 season on the Bucks. Moves can still happen at the deadline. So, it's there's no need to rush into things just to do things. Like, if you have a plan, write it out.
And I think at this point, the next dominoes to fall, what happens with DeMar DeRozan? Does that have any impact on the Bucks? And does it have any impact on other teams that then look to, okay, we need to add a similar type of player? Obviously, the Bucks don't necessarily have that on the roster, but there's always those ripple effects. The Paul Reed move as well. Where does he end up? Assuming the 76ers do, in fact, waive him, is he a potential target for the Bucks? Could you get him on a vet minimum? I doubt it at this point, given how young he is and the contract that he had. But nonetheless, those, I think, in the short term, the most interesting things to monitor here as we continue to move through free agency. We also have Summer League. Oh, by the way, starting today, Summer League schedule tips off. So we'll spend a lot of time scouting our young guys, as there's quite a few young names for the Bucks and Bucks fans to monitor in this version of the Summer League. So we'll spend quite a bit of time reviewing that on the upcoming shows here throughout next week and all throughout Summer League on Locked On Bucks. And one last piece of business that I suppose we should mention. Again, Camille, we're going to keep saying it until we're blue in the face, just to remind everyone, this is not in place of a Bucks-specific show. This is an additional show, extra show for you. We still got to figure out the cadence of how frequently we're going to do it, but we figured, hey, there's a big event happening this weekend. We've talked about it before. We might as well do it this weekend. So tomorrow on this Locked On Bucks feed, you and I are going to do the frequently mentioned wrestling version of Locked On Bucks. We're somewhat recapping the week, but a heavy emphasis on what happened in Money in the Bank, which takes place later tonight in Toronto. So we will have that as a free additional show, recapping Money in the Bank and all things wrestling through this past week, coming up in your feed tomorrow. We'll be back Monday with a look at Summer League, maybe some more moves. What happens with Paul Reed? Any other moves that have taken place? And is Giannis in Greece? Are they headed towards the Olympics? So we'll shift our focus to that as well. So quite a bit yet coming up over these course of the next couple of days. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow and Monday for two separate shows on Locked On Bucks.